I want to talk about the 6 lies that I think we tell ourselves as homeschool moms. I've been a homeschool mom. I'm Teresa. I've been a homeschool mom for a couple, I'm not a homeschool mom anymore, but I've been a homeschool mom for a decade and a half. I've graduated 3 kids. My 4th is in high school now. And I want to share the 6 lies I think that we tell ourselves because we're trying to avoid our inner work. So the first lie I think we tell ourselves is that we don't have time to spend getting to know ourselves or doing the deep inner work, because that would be for someone who has no children and definitely is not homeschooling. And though I identified as a homeschool mom, I still say it. It's off the top of my mouth as soon as I introduce myself. I've been doing it for so long. It is a role we play for a very long time, and it almost feels like it becomes our identity, but it's not. We have a self, a person outside of the homeschool mom identity. Somebody that's just you. Perhaps you when you were 8, and what did you like to do when you were 8? I think it actually serves us to look at things like our passions, our interests, hobbies, or anything that we like to do, and especially if we were 8 and we had interests, and could we include them now? Because one day we won't be a homeschool mom. Also, someday, soon, probably yesterday, possibly years ago, we should have spent time getting to know ourselves and our triggers, our big emotions, learning more about why we have the wounds we do, the tendencies we do, the triggers that we do, learn a bit about our mother wound. That's a discussion that I'll be having on the podcast. You'll listen to that or be able to listen to that tomorrow. It'll be released tomorrow morning, early in the morning. So you can find my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. I think I titled it Healing the Mother Wound for the Homeschool Mom. And so that is something that I think has deep relevance to us, because whatever our triggers are, whatever our big emotions are, whatever our tendencies are that we know aren't healthy, those things, we probably needed to figure that out years ago. So we definitely need to know ourselves. We cannot tell ourselves that we don't have time to get to know ourselves. How can you get to know yourself? I think the easiest thing you can do is get a journal. And journal every day about whatever you think, even if it's just 5 minutes. You can, of course, also do things like breathing techniques, mindfulness moments, having a meditative or prayer practice, therapy, coaching. I know someone who coaches. The lie number 2 that I would tell you is that we need to practice our separateness, but we have a tendency to believe that we can always be together. And we don't have to attend to other people's, maybe their emotions and their needs, because we have too much going on. And we don't need to routinely assess our family dynamics. Really look at them and ask ourselves, what habits have we been developing? Family dynamics. That's a tricky one, because that can be something that evolves over the course of years. Sometimes we're unaware that there is a family dynamic that can be dealt with. We subconsciously join in relationships, and sometimes we subconsciously react to our kids differently based on who they are, what relationships we might have unhealed or undealt with, and we project that challenge onto a child that seems similar to the person that we have a challenge with. So many different ways to create, let's say, overlapping and meshing kind of behaviors with other people in our families. So we really need to be able to look at our family dynamics, assess our family dynamics the way they actually are. Something that you can use as a tool to learn more about your family dynamics is something called attachment styles. It helps us to understand who we are, why we want to attach to someone. Also, other people want to attach to us and why they want to attach to us. So we can learn through Enneagram, that's a personality profiling system, learning to understand yourself and learning to understand how you relate to the other types or people in your family. And if you want to learn how to communicate in a way that honors and acknowledges everybody in their needs and their emotions in your family, then consider using Nonviolent Communication, a book by Marshall Rosenberg. I also have a podcast episode on that book because it was so impactful in my life. So I think the lie number 2 is that we really don't have time to deal with family dynamics, or that we aren't willing to do it because it just has to wait. And I'd say you can make it wait, but it will demand attention. There's this concept called self-differentiation that I speak about in my book, also called Homeschool Mama Self-Care. And it really is this concept where you are learning how to be your full person in your family and also allow your other full family members, or the family members, to be fully them. That is tricky. I think that's like the challenge of a family, is to allow everyone in their family to be fully them while also be fully, by also trying to be fully you. Challenging, but I think it's the goal. So I think the lie number 3 is that we might understand our feelings. We might spend some time trying to understand our feelings, but we aren't going to spend time trying to sit and listen and accept the feelings that other people have in our homes. And this one was very tricky for me because I have a thing with anger where it's really uncomfortable for me, to say the least. Everybody has that experience. I have a unique reason, and I'm sure that many of us here do. But there is something about anger that was really hard for me to engage or hold. So really allowing ourselves, or teaching ourselves, to sit with someone's emotion and allowing them to feel the feelings. No, I'm not saying that they should act in a way that's unkind or disrespectful. I'm saying that learning how to, especially with our kids, but whoever, anger is a thing. We have to be able to sit with it and allow other people to vent, not vent toward us, but be able to feel angry, and then also learn how to manage their own emotions, be in their own emotions, figure out why they're feeling what they're feeling, give them space, give them time, and then come back together and listen to what is their feeling and what is the need underneath their feeling. Again, that references the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, a really significant book that's on my homeschool mama reading list for relationships, for stronger relationships. So we can't assume that we are experiencing our other people or our family members' emotions just because we are with our kids and we are very familiar with our kids' emotions. It doesn't mean that we should be experiencing their feelings or their experience as though it's ours. That's tricky. That is even really hard to see, to really identify whether we're doing that. Because obviously, often, as moms, we feel the feelings of our kids. We have an experience when our kids have an experience. It's a natural thing to do, but we also have to learn how to be separate and to recognize that what's happening to them is not happening to us, because then we can get into patterns of taking on whatever they're doing and whatever they're experiencing as though it is our experience. So our goal is to support and guide them, not make it harder for them to feel their feelings and be fully experienced in their own feelings without also having to deal with your feelings. Sometimes we need to allow them, give them space to hold more than one feeling, that they are going to actually experience more than one feeling. That's a human thing where we don't always feel just one feeling at a time. We might have many parts of us represented, many parts having different feelings. And so we need to allow that for our children. Give them space to do that, because we're teaching them how to deal and engage their big emotions, not just ours. So the fourth lie that I would say that we tell ourselves is that we just don't have to deal with the big family dynamics. We could do things like get angry repeatedly and not recognize that that's a sign that we need to deal with something. Or we can allow people to stand or step over our boundaries and not do anything about it because it feels like it would be too hard to deal with it, or mean we're trying to keep somebody accountable that actually doesn't want to be held accountable, or you fill in the blank, so many possibilities there. But considering the dynamics in our relationship, and if we have a sense that something's not quite right, go to a counselor or seek an objective non-family person, a friend, maybe, but it has to be like someone without skin in the game, someone that's not going to be affected by the choices that you make within your family. Someone without skin in the game usually means someone that you don't know in real life. So consider a coach or a therapist. So the fifth lie that I think we can tell ourselves is that the feelings that our kids are having, or the experience that the kids are having, requires us to buy into their emotions or experience their emotions alongside them. And though it is very difficult to not do that, as I was saying earlier, it needs to be the goal as honoring them as a separate person with separate emotions, and then attending to our own emotions while they're having those emotions as well. So learning how to really honor your own feelings and experiences, and also honoring the experiences of the other person. Maybe your child, maybe your partner, maybe your friend, whoever. I think it's valuable to take a look at certain dynamics in the family systems theory of Bowen's family systems theory. If you've never heard of that before, I recently put out a podcast episode on this, because there are certain principles that you'll notice in your family that maybe you take it for granted. You're like, but this is what we always do. This is what we've always done. Like, for instance, when you have an argument with your partner and then you go to your friend to deal with it, and you're frustrated and you want to talk through it or gossip or get support and make yourself feel better. I think, and by the way, totally have done this. So I think it's not healthy. I think it includes another person in the relationship. And that's why I think it's useful to have someone that's not skin in the game, someone that is objective. So triangulation is one thing. It's the same thing as watching your two kids get into an argument, and then one of them is really mad at the other person. So they go to the another sibling and say, I can't believe so-and-so did that. You should not let her have her ... That's triangulation. It's harder to identify sometimes when it is us. Triangulation is an issue. Sometimes giving unsolicited advice is a challenge. And in the beginning years as a parent, you're like, but what are you talking about? I have to give them unsolicited advice. It's a thing. It's a parent thing. Yes. And then it kind of transitioned into that adolescent stage. And then you realize they don't want it anymore. This is hard to accept, but it is our reality that we have to accept that they're individuating and they don't want unsolicited advice. Something that I've learned in my coaching is really just to ask sometimes, may I give you some feedback? And I'm sure someone's going to say no at some point. But when you even preface a conversation point with that, may I give you some feedback? Then we immediately say, am I willing to accept feedback from that person? Okay, what would you like to share? You create an openness or an acceptance often, not always, because sometimes you don't want to know, but from the other person, you're more willing to actually listen, and it doesn't feel like it's forced upon advice. Also blaming, so tricky. How many times we can get into some sort of conflict, or we can get frustrated with a kiddo and we're like, you shouldn't be doing this. If you hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened. Blaming. You see it with your kids. They're doing it with each other. Maybe when they're teenagers, they're doing it with you. But when we do that, we're not actually solving anything. We're not creating peace. We're not listening to the other people's feelings. We're not holding what their needs might be. We're not addressing the real challenge underneath that. And so we need to sometimes say, you know what? I'm going to sit with your feelings. I am going to say, I don't always know what you're thinking or understand why something's valuable to you, but I'm going to take it at face value and listen to you and try to reflect back what you say. I'm going to try and get curious about what you just said and ask, so did you just say ... No? Okay, how about this? So help me understand. Can you use different words? Can you help me understand it if you say it in a word picture? Or maybe you need some time. Maybe a younger child needs to write a picture, draw a picture, or maybe you need to give them a list of emojis or a page of emojis and say, well, how do you feel? But the goal is to help them get clear on how they're feeling and learn how to feel their feelings and be, owning it so that they're not blaming other people and we're not blaming them. Get curious. That's what I would say to that. And the sixth lie that I think we tell ourselves is that we are homeschool families, so we are going to have a perfect family. You're welcome, universe. And that ain't a thing. Ask me how I know. It doesn't happen like that. You might think it. You might think this is a beautiful, perfect setup for an idyllic family. And yet, I'll bet you know what I know. This is not a reality. Even if it's somehow a deep desire to take your kiddo away from a culture that feels inconsistent with your values, or away from a school system that doesn't allow for bullying, or they did allow for bullying, or that maybe they wouldn't say they allowed it, but they definitely allowed it. Or maybe you're trying to create a family that you didn't have, or do something different than your parents did. And all of those things can happen, but perfection will not be part of our homeschool stories. And so learning how to address that feeling of not good enough, learning how to address all the discomforts, the failures, the sense of guilt that we're just not quite hitting it. Yeah, it's not going to happen. And that's spoken from somebody that's launched 3 kids, and I've seen a lot of people be frustrated with this moment in time where they go, well, I just really tried so hard. And we do. And that's why I really believe that we need to choose growth. We need to sign up to growth, accept imperfection, accept that this life is going to be imperfect. We're always called up to growth again and again and again. And that means that we won't be the perfect parent before we begin parenting. We won't be the perfect parent as we homeschool. We're just going to be us, and we're going to grow and learn alongside our kids. So that's what I wanted to share with you, the 6 lies that I see us as homeschool moms can sometimes tell ourselves and each other. I'd love to hear if you could add to that. If you have other ideas, or if you have any thoughts, you're welcome to put it in the comments below. You're welcome to book a conversation with me if you're curious about coaching. I also have a reading list for personal growth, a reading list for homeschooling, and a reading list for your relationships. If any of these things sound curious to you, then just put it in the comments section. I'll make sure to get you the resources. Have a great week.